And we're back with Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. This time, Season 1, Episode 4. Yeah, we're going to be moving on with this show. It has been great so far. People say the show is not so great. Let me just tell you, from what I've seen so far, this show is great, especially with that last episode. Awesome action from Arondir and the other elves. Juicy introductions of Númenor, Elendil and Isildur. So, going to be seeing what's going on with that. And the Half-Foots found out about the tall stranger, who could possibly be Gandalf or Saruman. Still undecided as to which. My bet is leaning more onto Gandalf, just because it would make sense if it's Gandalf, considering how much love Gandalf has for the hobbits in The Lord of the Rings. So it would make sense if that love of hobbits started here. We didn't have any Elrond or Durin last time, or Bronwyn or Theo, so maybe that'll change this episode. Who knows? But I am very excited. And we also got the introduction of possibly Sauron with Adar. We didn't actually see him, we saw a little bit, but who knows if that's actually him or not, or if it's just another orc. Who knows? But, well, you probably do, because you've probably seen this already. But, yeah, not going to waste any more time anymore. Got my Ring of Power once again with me, as well as my Sean Bean Boromir autograph. Going to be putting out a different Lord of the Rings autograph every episode. So stay tuned to find out who else is on here. So, yeah, I'm not going to waste any more time, and let's just get into Season 1, Episode 4 of Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, starting right now. Now that was awesome. Once again, another fantastic episode. Ooh. You know what? No Half-Foot story this time. No Nori, no stranger, none of that. But there was a mention of the Starfall. And this is, you know what? It may have changed again. My opinion of who the stranger is might have changed again. Because it could be Sauron. It could be Saruman. Because Saruman is meant to be the White Wizard, and I know this bit about Lord of the Rings lore. The White Wizard is meant to be the enemy of Sauron. I know Saruman eventually corrupts that, that's why Gandalf becomes the White Wizard. But the White Wizard is meant to be the enemy of Sauron. And the guy said it's a sign, and the sign, the bringing of the enemy of Sauron would only mean that Sauron is around still. Because there'd be no reason for Saruman, the White Wizard, the enemy of Sauron, to be here if Sauron wasn't gaining power. So that makes me believe that, obviously we know Sauron is going to eventually come back into power. So that makes me assume that it's Saruman. But I keep changing back and forth. Is it Gandalf? Is it Saruman? But that's saying that the Starfall is a sign that something's coming. That makes me assume Saruman, the White Wizard, the enemy of Sauron. But yeah, once again, we had the return of Durin and Elrond in this episode. I think the only people who have shown up in every single episode so far are Galadriel and Arondir. Those are the only two people who have shown up in every episode. Because let me just go through them. Durin and Disa, they weren't in the first episode. They weren't in the first episode, and they weren't in the last episode either. Halbrand didn't show up until the second episode. Elrond wasn't in last episode. Nori wasn't in this episode. So I think Galadriel and Arondir are the only two people to show up in every episode so far. I was almost thinking that, well, obviously Elendil and Isildur. Elendil didn't get introduced until last episode, but up until the very end when he showed up, I thought he wasn't going to be in this one either. They waited a long time to show Elendil again. But bloody hell, there was a lot of nice stuff in this episode. First, starting off with the Queen Regent and her vision of the tsunami, the great wave coming over Numenor. And I do know this in Lord of the Rings lore, that eventually Numenor is a kingdom that gets swept by a great wave, and its ruins are all over Middle-earth. In fact, I was mentioning last episode when we saw the faces going into Numenor that it reminded me of the statues in the Fellowship of the Ring, and I know that those statues are ruins of Numenor that have drifted over to Middle-earth. We know that eventually is going to come, and it's interesting. It's very, very, I wouldn't say nice, but it means a lot that we might see the fall of Numenor, despite how beautiful it is. So which storyline do I go with first? There was the Arondir stuff, there was the Elrond and Durin stuff, and there was Galadriel stuff. I feel like the Galadriel stuff was the most juicy, so I'll leave that till last. The Arondir and Theo stuff was very interesting, so we'll leave that second. So let's start off with the Elrond and Durin stuff. It's interesting that Celebrimbor said that he knew Elrond's father, and that Elrond's father said that one day his son would hold Celebrimbor's future. And now Elrond's doing this. He's ensured that Celebrimbor's tower is being created, and fast, I'd say. Look, did you see that at the beginning? It's been done in quick fashion. Celebrimbor so quick to it that he knows that Durin is hiding something. So quick to it, he knows that Durin is hiding something, and Elrond travels to Khazad-dûm, Moria, to find out what it is. And through awesome detective skills, honestly, I loved the intelligence of Elrond displayed in this episode, when the Disa just gives off the lie that he's in the mines, and he's deep down in the mines, and yet Elrond can see that he's not taking his hammer with him, and his wife is preparing either a wine or a meal for him. So he knows that he's not mining anything, and he knows that he's not going to be gone for a long time. And through that, and through also spying on Durin as well, with that far elves, those elf eyes, how far do those elf eyes see? And he spied the conversation between Durin and Disa, and discovered the Mithril mines. He discovered the mines, and him and Durin made a promise that he would never reveal it to anyone. And honestly, I pray that promise doesn't get broken, because despite how little we've seen of it so far, I really like the friendship between Elrond and Durin, and I hope it doesn't get broken. I don't think elves have access to any mithril in the Lord of the Rings. In fact, the only mithril that's in Lord of the Rings is Bilbo Baggins' shirt, which he gives to Frodo. But that doesn't necessarily mean that but he was given that by Thorin in Erebor. I don't know. None of that necessarily says that Elrond spills the secrets. So I hope. And then we got a little cave in. We got the name drop of Mithril as well. And we got a little cave in going on, and the way that it happened when Durin ran in saying that there's still dwarves down there, and then we came back to it later on, and you saw Disa singing. I thought, is this a funeral for the dwarves that died in the mine shaft? And is this a funeral for Durin as well? But I see that it was the resonating thing that she was talking about. I don't exactly understand what happened, but it was still very interesting to watch. And that was followed by the revelation and the relief that all of the dwarves had survived, and that Durin had survived as well. And obviously Durin has taken a bit of liberties with the story, where Durin's taken a few liberties with the story that says that explains how him and Elrond met with each other. He's taken a few liberties with that story, but I also wonder if Elrond is taking a few liberties with that story. It's just fun seeing them bicker as friends. That was also with an emotional conversation between Elrond and Durin about their father and how much time they have left with them, as well as a conversation between Durin and, well, Prince Durin and King Durin himself. But now I wonder where this is going to go, because now Durin has been invited to Lindon. So I wonder if we're going to see Gil-galad again in the next episode, the Elf King. I do wonder if the elves are supposed to get 3 rings, why does Gil-galad not get one? Or does it, and then it eventually gets left to Gandalf? Because I know Elrond is supposed to get one, and I know Galadriel's supposed to get one. Or does Gil-galad eventually give one of his rings to them? Give his ring to one of them? I don't know. I do wonder how this is all going to go, because once again, we are halfway through this show, this season so far, and we have not seen a single ring. In fact, we've not even finished building the forge that's going to build those rings. Ooh, interesting theory. But also heartbreaking if it happens. Is Elrond going to break his promise, and are the rings forged out of Mithril? Possibly. Is that why they're so... Because Gimli tries to destroy the One Ring in the Fellowship of the Ring with his axe, and it shatters the axe. And Durin himself was saying that Mithril could put all weapons to shame, because it's so tough. Imagine an army's worth of Mithril armour and weapons. That is the most unstoppable army you will ever see. But alas, we never see that happen. I can't tell you how intrigued I am at this show, and how I want to see everything eventually come together. So that is the Elrond story for this episode. We get into the Arondir stuff, which they seem... Like I said, I was comparing Arondir to like a Jon Snow type character in this, and it's quite appropriate, I'd say. Because he's the one dealing with the issue right now, and in Game of Thrones, Jon Snow is the one who has to deal with the threat at the wall, meaning the White Walkers. And Arondir is now the one who's on the front lines in the Southlands, who has to deal with Adar, the Orcs, and eventually the forming of Mordor. And that was very, very juicy, because I know what's going to go on in those lands. Yeah, we saw the town, Bronwyn, Theo, and the people migrating to the Elven Tower. There's not a lot of people there. It seems a lot of people have been gathering here over time because they've all been experiencing the signs. Like the orcs coming in. And very much reminding me of Helm's Deep when they first arrived. You know when Éowyn first leads the people of Edoras into Helm's Deep and it's already packed up with thousands of people, or a lot of people. It reminded me of that very much when you see Bronwyn and the people come into the tower. And they do not have a lot of food. Definitely not a lot of food. They had like 7 potatoes and that was it. So Theo, credit to him, it was a good idea, kind of, to go back and get food, in the town. And granted, it was a good idea. It didn't end very well for him. Well, it led to a bad situation, but it didn't. But it was a good idea because he took one person with him, that fucking kid from the first episode. So he took him with him, and he did come back with the food, but it means he abandoned Theo down there when the place got over. When the orcs started coming in, when the daylight faded, the orcs started coming in. And it seems that those orcs are after, well, they recognise the hilt immediately, the hilt of the blade immediately, and now they're after it. And so, honestly, Theo tried to escape that Theo trying to escape that town. Was that a long one shot as well? I can't remember. If it was a long one shot, it was very well done. Of him just trying to avoid all of these orcs. It was like a stealth mission in a video game. He's like, keep out of the light, stick to the shadows, don't be seen. And he was at the last hurdle, and he got caught. And then that's when Aronde showed up, who earlier in the episode had an audience with Adar. Who Adar is a very interesting... I can't tell what he is. Because I know that the orcs used to be elves who got manipulated and tortured by dark powers, and that's how they became orcs. But Adar, it seems that he's still got a lot of the elven in him, because he had pointy ears, so that leads me to assume he's more elf and not man. It seems that he's a servant of Sauron, or is he Sauron himself? We don't know. But he seems to be not as corrupted as... Well, he's obviously not as corrupted as regular orcs, because he could talk proper. He could speak Elvish. I'm very curious about Adar. He's got big ambitions as well, because he says he plans to become a god. So that definitely pushes me towards Sauron. But the thing that pulls me away from Sauron is because he seemed very emotional when he had to kill that injured orc. Because he had a bit of a shine in his eyes, which showed that he is experiencing sadness, or maybe possibly beginning to cry. And I don't imagine Sauron to do that. But either way, he offers Aronde an escape. He lets Aronde go, and he tells him to deliver a message to the people, a message that we hear later on. But yeah, back to Aronde and Theo, and then we see Aronde and Theo escaping through the woods with all that slow motion of them being chased and shot at. And then Bronwyn shows up, and I thought, oh my god, Bronwyn's about to die. Because showing all the slow-mo and then having Bronwyn randomly come in, I thought, oh no, oh no, oh no, she's going to die. But thankfully she survived. And they escaped out into the daylight where the orcs couldn't chase them. So my heart was pumping in that. I thought, oh god, Bronwyn was about to die, because obviously Theo has still got stuff to go on with that blade, and Aronde, I imagine Aronde is going to survive for most of this show. So I felt pretty safe about Theo and Aronde, because they still have stories to be told. But I thought Bronwyn could die. They make it back to the tower, where Aronde delivers the message that you either leave or pledge allegiance to them, and either get the hell out of these lands which we want, or bow down to us. So that's the there's the options. Get out or bow, and that's it. But then there's the tavern owner who knows about the hill. He knows about the hill, and it seems that he's used it before, because he has the similar scars that Theo now has because of that blade. Is he... I was getting the impression, I can't remember the exact words that he was saying, but I was getting the impression that he's a follower of Sauron. And now Theo is involved in this, and I can only imagine how long this is going to go before someone else gets wind of it. But yeah. Yeah, terrifying stuff going on in the Southlands. But most of the juicy stuff that came around was from Galadriel's story once again. Just like last episode when we got Numenor, Elendil and Isildur, very similar stuff was happening in this one. Galadriel, once again, the vision of the wave again, the destruction of of Numenor. And then you also have... Then we have Isildur. I can't remember what was first. Was it Galadriel getting locked in her cell? Or was it Isildur? I can't remember. We'll do the Isildur stuff first. Clearly, I said it last episode, his father is trying to push him into this being a captain of the sea and everything. Clearly something else is calling to Isildur. He keeps hearing this woman's whisper coming from the west end of the island. The west side of the island, so he wants to know what it is. And he blatantly, deliberately messes up his own chances of being on the Sea Guard. But in doing so, he accidentally fucks up his own friends as well. And then we've got, what's her name? Aenir or something in... Aenir? I can't remember the sister's name. Yeah, she seems to have caught the eye of the Chancellor's son. And the Chancellor seems to be a good political figure. Who he goes round and he speaks and checks on all these little vendors. He said it himself. The true part, one of the parts of a ruler is checking on the small affairs as well as the grander ones. So, and then he takes time out of his day to stop any uprising because of those guys last episode who confronted Halbrand and got beaten up by him. And they start spreading rumours that the Queen is losing control because of Galadriel showing up. And the Chancellor takes time out of his day to reassure the people that Numenor is still strong. That Numenor's leadership is not under any control. So he takes the time to reassure the people. And says that Numenor will always be a land of men. And there's good and bad to that. It's good that he's stopping uprising, but it's also kind of bad that he's saying Numenor's always going to be a place of men and only men. Like, at some point you've got to let an elf or a dwarf on your island. At some point, you can keep the orcs away. That's all cool. But at some point, you've got to let other people into your country. Because it's very apparent in this world that elves keep to elves, men keep to men, and dwarves keep to the dwarves. That's it. And they don't see that eventually they're all going to come under attack, and there's got to be an alliance to help combat that. An alliance that Galadriel was trying to push. An alliance that Galadriel is trying to push with the Queen Regent Miriel. And initially Miriel dismisses Galadriel, saying, no way am I going to help you. I'm not sending people back to Middle-earth. I'm not rallying behind Halbrand's claim to being king. So Galadriel tries to say, right, if you're not gonna help me, can your father help me? And she demands to speak to the father. Hence why she lands in a jail cell right next to Halbrand. And this is where it gets interesting. It was already interesting, but this is where Halbrand starts whispering advice to Galadriel and saying, instead of going at everything with this stubborn idea that you can get anything you want and you can demand anything you want, try and work your way into Miriel's head, or find out what Miriel wants and learn how to... It's like I'm starting to see a conversion. Like, the way that Halbrand described this is how you should handle the situation, it sounds very much how Cate Blanchett's Galadriel would handle something. Very much someone who speaks and tries to convince otherwise, as opposed to demanding what she wants. So is Halbrand part of the reason why this Galadriel becomes the Galadriel that we know later on? Someone who is not demanding, but rather convincing or advising. So it'd be cool to see, because I've got to say, she's very one-dimensional, is this Galadriel right now. it'd be fun to see the transition from this one-dimensional Galadriel to the character that we know in Lord of the Rings. I mean, we've got to see that at some point. I imagine it's going to be a slow burn to transition from this character to this one, to that one. From this Galadriel to this Galadriel, I imagine it's going to be a slow conversion, and eventually when the show ends, she's going to be the Galadriel we know, and we're like, how did that happen? But we're going to see it throughout this show, I imagine. She's let out of her cell. She's let out of her cell by the Chancellor, who says that the Queen is granting her permission to leave, to go back to Middle-earth. But Galadriel uses that opportunity to go to the King, where she finds Miriel also waiting. And that's when she finds out the condition of the King, who is very ill, very sickly and bedridden, and is not capable of ruling at this moment. And that's when we get a full heart-to-heart between Galadriel and Miriel, which leads us up to the tower, where we get to see a Palantir. Is it the Palantir that Saruman has? Because this is where the connections start coming. If the stranger with the Harfoot is indeed Saruman, and here's the Palantir, are they eventually going to come together? Because apparently there used to be 7 Palantir, and this is one of them, the other 6 are unaccounted for. Is this the one that Saruman has later on? Because it looks similar, but then again they could all look similar. Galadriel actually uses the Palantir and sees the exact same vision that Miriel keeps seeing of the wave destroying Numenor, and it all starts with the falling of the petals from the tree. And that is why you find out why Miriel is so hesitant to help Galadriel, because she sees Galadriel's coming as the start of the fall of Numenor, and she actually says things, because Galadriel asks her to reforge the alliance between men and elves, possibly a last alliance of men and elves. She says, turn away from a path of fear and follow a path of faith. And Miriel says that faith can convince one heart. It can bind one heart, but it can't. But it's 2 smaller threads hanging inside Kingdom. Meaning, and I'm taking that as meaning, if it was only her that was involved in this, then she would go along with it. But then she's not willing to bet her entire kingdom on it. And then she decides to she keeps going with it and she tries sending Galadriel away. But as soon as Galadriel leaves the shores, the petals start falling, and she immediately changes her mind and decides on she's going herself. She's personally escorting Galadriel back to Middle-earth. And Elendil is now calling for volunteers to travel to Middle-earth as well. And Isildur has volunteered. So Isildur and Elendil and Miriel are all going to Middle-earth. And is Halbrand going with them? Who knows? He seems to want to stay in Numenor. But apparently his duty is calling him back to... Apparently he has a duty that Galadriel thinks he should fulfill in Middle-earth, but he wants to stay here. Very much Aragorn-like. When he just wants to become a ranger, he doesn't want to accept the power of being king. But eventually he has to accept it and becomes king, and in doing so he's a big part of taking down Sauron in Lord of the Rings. And eventually people just start volunteering left and right, and this is where you get your army to go back to Middle-earth. So yeah, I can see the pieces coming together. Ranking out of the way. I know I've been going for a long time. Jesus, 1 hour 40, wow. I'm so sorry about this, but... Okay, ranking. Was it better than last episode? You know what? Yes, because I can see pieces coming together now. This was the best episode so far. Very narrowly though, I think the action from Arondir and the other elves last episode makes it so close. But because I can see the pieces coming together now, with Elrond and... Not with Elrond, with Elendil and Isildur going back to Middle-earth, I can see the pieces coming together. So yeah, I'm excited. This was the best episode so far. But yeah, that is all we've got for this week of oh my god, I've bent anything else. This is all we've got for this episode of The Rings of Power. Until next time, we are over and out. Bye!